June 6, 1944, English Channel, off the coast of Normandy. The night was dying, and the horizon was only a pale line between darkness and the coming storm. Beneath the churn of steel-gray waves, a handful of men waited in silence, their breaths slow, their bodies trembling from cold and anticipation. They carried no rifles, pistols, or armor. And yet, in barely a few minutes, they would become the first ground fighters to confront the full force of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. At 7:25 a.m., 20 minutes before H-hour, these British frogmen slipped over the sides of their landing crafts and disappeared into the freezing surf, beginning a mission so dangerous that few believed they would survive it. The men swam toward the waterline of Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, the three eastern landing zones assigned to British and Canadian forces. The Germans had transformed every inch of those shorelines into a labyrinth of traps. Mines hidden beneath the waves, steel hedgehogs set to rip open landing craft, wooden stakes rigged with explosives, and razor wire designed to halt the first wave of invaders. The frogmen carried nothing more than wire cutters, explosive charges, and sheer resolve. Their task was devastatingly simple: clear a path or die trying. Reaching the shallows, they began the work that would determine the fate of the invasion. Moving through deafening surf and bursts of German fire, they placed demolition charges along the obstacles, slicing wire underwater, freeing passages that heavy machines would need to reach the beach. When the explosives detonated, entire lines of German defenses vanished in plumes of water and smoke. The result was a series of lanes that allowed tanks, infantry, and landing craft to push straight toward the shore. Their precision, completed in minutes, opened the very arteries through which the Allies would pour and overwhelm the German defenders. Many soldiers never knew who had made their advance possible, but without those unseen men clearing mines beneath the gunfire, thousands would have died before even setting foot on land. The story of these frogmen began long before D-Day. April 1942, Portsmouth, England. Inside a secret Royal Navy facility hidden from public view, British engineers and divers quietly began experimenting with a new kind of warfare. Combat swimmers trained to operate beneath the surface, capable of doing what ships and planes could not. Early equipment barely qualified as functional, and the concept of underwater demolition in battle was so new that even senior officers had doubts. But the threat of German naval mines and the need for clandestine reconnaissance pushed the program forward. Soon, the small Portsmouth facility was no longer enough. Training expanded northward into the remote Scottish wilderness. Loch Erisort, Loch Corrie, and Loch Cairnbawn became silent laboratories for undersea combat. The icy waters punished the men, but they forged resilience there that no classroom could teach. Hours were spent in pools filled with mock torpedoes and dummy mines, practicing delicate disarmament work that required absolute calm, even when oxygen ran low or fingers numbed from cold. Every task demanded precision. One mistake meant death. Their tools were primitive at first. Many frogmen were trained using oxygen cylinders scavenged from shot-down German aircraft, the only supply that could be secured quickly in wartime. Masks fogged, regulators jammed, and visibility was often no more than an arm's length. Yet each problem led to innovations. By the time the invasion approached, new equipment, such as manned torpedoes and masks with flip-up lenses that allowed binocular use above water, gave the men unprecedented capability. Their craft was becoming a science shaped by urgency and necessity. By summer 1944, training had spread far beyond Britain. Operations were conducted off the rugged coasts of Norway and throughout the Mediterranean, where frogmen rehearsed long-distance swims, covert shoreline reconnaissance, and synchronized demolitions. These lessons gave them the endurance and confidence required for what awaited in Normandy. They learned how to move unseen, how to plant charges without disturbing sensors, and how to navigate hostile coastlines using only instinct and the rhythm of the tide. Every exercise carried the unspoken truth. Eventually, they would face the real things. They knew that Normandy would not forgive hesitation. Every training dive, every cold water night, every drill in those remote lochs was meant to prepare them for a shoreline they had only studied through photographs and reconnaissance sketches. They had never set eyes on the real beaches they would clear, yet they memorized their shapes, currents, and likely enemy positions until they could navigate them in darkness with nothing but instinct to guide them. June 6, 1944, Normandy. At 7:25 a.m., 20 minutes before H-hour. As dawn climbed behind the Armada, the frogmen advanced through the shifting underwater landscape, feeling for obstacles with gloved hands as explosions thudded through the waves. The water was thick with silt, debris, and the shock waves of naval bombardments. Each diver worked by touch alone, crawling along the ocean floor, tying charges to the base of stakes that bristled with hidden detonators. They couldn't see the German gunners firing at the shapes approaching the beach, but they could hear the angry percussion of machine guns cutting through the morning air above them. When their explosives ignited in the shallows, the shock was immediate. Waves heaved upward, fragments of steel rained across the surf, and in the split seconds between detonations, the men regrouped, checked one another's positions, and moved to the next obstacle without pause. Time was everything. Behind them, hundreds of landing craft were advancing, trusting that the sea lanes would be open by the time they reached them. The frogmen did not speak. Communication came through gestures, taps on shoulders, and brief flashes of hand signals glimpsed through bubbles and smoke. Their work changed the geometry of the invasion. The routes they opened became the arteries through which some of the first armored vehicles rolled onto the beaches. Infantry, who followed minutes later, found fewer mines than expected and pockets of clear sand, offering just enough room for officers to reorganize their companies. In the chaos of the landing, few noticed the divers slipping back toward the sea after completing their runs, exhausted and bruised but alive. They left no signatures, no markers, no traces of their presence, only corridors that stretched from deep water to dry land. Yet these men were not merely demolition experts. Their role in Normandy was the culmination of years of secrecy and improvisation. The months leading up to the invasion had shaped them into specialists capable of navigating any coastal environment the war could offer. Training missions off Norway forced them to operate in waters colder than the human body could tolerate for long, teaching them endurance and control under punishing conditions. Exercises in the Mediterranean introduced them to clear, warm seas where they learned to conceal themselves even when visibility betrayed every movement. No two coastlines taught the same lesson, but each contributed to the skill set they carried to the shores of France. After the landings, events moved quickly across Europe, but the frogmen's mission only expanded. Seas and rivers remained cluttered with the detritus of war, and Allied planners needed channels reopened for supply routes, troop movements, and liberated ports. The divers traveled across northern waters to disable floating docks and scuttle-captured ships off the Norwegian coast, ensuring that enemy assets could not be reclaimed or used to disrupt Allied lines. Their operations required meticulous timing. Dock structures were laden with hidden charges, booby-trapped compartments, and unstable debris. Working in darkness, they affixed explosives at critical points, collapsed supports, and let tides drag the wreckage into depths where it could not harm. Farther east and south, the shifts in the Pacific theater called for their expertise as well. In the waters near Thailand and Singapore, they confronted tropical currents, coral beds, and wrecked harbors choked with the remnants of naval battles. They neutralized torpedoes left half buried in sand, removed hulks that blocked vital trade routes, and searched for ordnance lodged in riverbeds, where civilian vessels would soon travel again. Each task required a calm precision that belied the danger. A single misjudged grip could trigger a chain reaction. Yet they worked with the same quiet discipline they had shown on the morning of the landings. When peace arrived, the world breathed out, but the oceans did not. Sunken munitions remained lethal, and the frogmen became indispensable to reconstruction efforts. They traveled from port to port, clearing channels for merchant ships and fishing fleets, restoring access to harbors that had been closed for years. In bomb-blasted estuaries, they extracted mines that had been drifting since the earliest days of the war. In river crossings once choked with steel traps, they opened safe passages so civilians could rebuild their towns. No battlefield glory marked these tasks, yet the impact was profound, measured not in medals, but in the lives saved long after the fighting had ended. Their legacy grew almost overnight. The techniques forged in Portsmouth and perfected in those Scottish lochs became the blueprint for underwater operations across the world. Nations studied their methods, realizing that the future of warfare and the prevention of future disasters would require specialists who could move as confidently below the surface as soldiers moved on land. What began as an experiment with salvaged breathing cylinders and improvised training drills evolved into modern naval diving units whose capabilities now define maritime special operations. But for the men who entered the surf on D-Day, legacy was not their concern. Their work was measured second by second, tide by tide, obstacle by obstacle. They fought a battle few could see, a battle that began long before the first soldier stepped onto the sand. And on that morning in June, when the Atlantic Wall met the full weight of Allied determination, it was the frogmen who struck the first blow, carving silent pathways that allowed an army to land. Their contributions rarely appear in photographs or battlefield maps. Their names seldom appear in accounts of the invasion. Yet every tank that rumbled ashore, every infantryman who found a clear route to shelter, every landing craft that made it to the beach in one piece owed its survival to the unseen divers who cleared the way beneath the waves. It was a mission defined not by visibility, but by necessity. And in those dark waters, under the stormy sky of Normandy, the frogmen of Britain proved that victory sometimes begins in places the world never sees.